everybody. Welcome back to Yee-Haw, Bonanza podcast. I'm your host, Melissa, and today we are watching Season 1, Episode 13, Vendetta, a Ben and Hoss-centric episode. I just got done watching Lord of the Rings and crying for like 20 minutes. I've been watching the three in the trilogy over the last 3 days, and just, my gosh, it is so good in every aspect, but I can't help but cry every single time. There's always something in those movies that makes me cry, especially when you get to the end. So I just got done with my 20-minute crying session, but I am here and I'm ready to watch some Bonanza today. As always, guys, if you are watching this podcast on YouTube today, please do not forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And if you are listening on Apple Podcasts, if you could please consider writing me a short positive review, I would really appreciate it. If you're liking the show, if you're enjoying it, every review helps boost me in the numbers, and I would just love to know what you think. So please consider writing me a positive review. Also, guys, if you want to share any thoughts, you are always welcome to email me at meltyenjoys@gmail.com. If you guys want to contribute to the show or you share any thoughts on these episodes, you are always free to email me and let me know what you think. Okay, so today's episode is Vendetta. This episode was written by Robert E. Thompson, David Dortor, and Fred Hamilton. It was directed by Joseph Kane. It premiered December 5th, 1959. Its special guests were Whitney Blake, Simon Scott, Mort Mills, Grant Richards, Bartlett Robinson, Bill Quinn, Harry Carey Jr., wow, that's fun to say, John Wilford, Maurice Manson, William Pullen, James Gavin, Baynes Barron, and Kay Stewart. Dang, some of those names were pretty fun to say. Looking at you, Harry Carey Jr. and Baynes Barron. The episode description on IMDb was not a super well-written episode description, so I went to the wiki page, and the wiki page description is: Ben and Hoss are caught in a bank robbery by the Morgan gang. Ben gets shot but manages to shoot one of Morgan's brothers. Leader Carl Morgan vows to avenge his death, and the town cowers in fear. I'd say that leaves out some slight details about the episode, but whatever. This is basically, for anybody listening or watching this episode for the first time, this episode is basically the plot of The Western High Noon. That's what they should probably put in the episode description on IMDb. They should just put in parentheses, basically the plot of High Noon, because it is. All right, just pulling up my notes. Some notable things about this episode. No guest star again this week. I don't know why they just dropped that all of a sudden. They had a really good thing going, and then they were like, meh, we're lazy, and we're not going to add any more guest stars. So I guess it's Whitney Blake? I'm not sure. It could be any of these people. I don't really know. But there's no notable guest star. So I guess we can move on from that. This week's director is Joseph Kane. And Joseph Kane only directed 3 episodes of Bonanza, his other 2 episodes being the Saga of Annie O'Toole and the Philip Diediesheimer story. And this is his last episode of Bonanza that he directed. And something I really liked about this episode that we can talk about later is the direction in this one's quite good. And I think specifically at the end, there were some things that he did with the camera, some street shots that were just very classic Western. And it did catch my eye in this one, so I'm looking forward to talking about that. Oh yeah, and one of the cast members on today's episode, Simon Scott, who plays Tom Pryor. I looked at Simon Scott's IMDb page, and it says that he appeared in Trapper John MD with Pernell Roberts, and he appeared in 83 episodes as the character Arnold Slocum. I've only ever seen a few episodes of Trapper John, and the episodes that I did see were just very classic, tongue-in-cheek 80s. Very hammy, and I've probably only seen like 3 or 4 episodes. But hey, it's an 80s show, and I love 80s cheese. It's like cheesy in the same way that Highway to Heaven is cheesy, but I'm not gonna bag on it because I love a little bit of cheesiness in my television. So another cast member in this week's episode is Bill Quinn, and I checked out his IMDb page, and apparently he played Dr. McCoy's father in the Star Trek movie The Final Frontier. Which is very interesting because he was in one of the only scenes in that movie that I actually legitimately liked. Star Trek The Final Frontier is famous for being one of the worst Star Trek movies. But it does have a really good scene, like halfway through the film, between Dr. McCoy's Spock and Kirk, where they all get to see each other's deepest pain. It's a very vulnerable scene. And it's a moment that I actually liked in the film, but in that moment, Dr. McCoy revisits the death of his father and the guilt of being unable to save his dad because he is a doctor. And it's a very emotional scene, but apparently Bill Quinn played McCoy's dad, and I did not know that until just now. So that's a fun fact for me, even though that Star Trek movie is not great. As far as the box set goes, there's no photos for this episode this week. No behind the scenes content once again. Looks like we're ready to watch this episode. So guys, pull up your copy of Vendetta and let's get started. Okay, we are hitting play in 3, 2, 1, go. Adam's jacket looks green there. You're not needed for this episode, so we'll see you next week, guys. Oh, Joe. I love how they have characters just exit at the beginning of an episode to let you know, like, they're not going to be here for whatever reason. But I love the episodes when all 4 Cartwrights are involved. So I hate watching certain family members leave. Joe and Adam literally missed this by 12 seconds. Oh, Hoss. Literally, though, Joe and Adam barely missed this happening. Oh, okay, I guess we're cutting directly into the next scene. That took me off guard. Okay, the bullet wound actually looks pretty good there. Sometimes the blood design looks chalky or painty, but there it looks pretty good. Did the sheriff always have to ask for volunteers, or could they just make people go? Could they appoint people to the law and you're like, you can't resist this, otherwise you're going to be arrested? Like, I'm just curious as to what those rules were of that time, if it was just purely volunteer based or if they had to. Why is the name always Billy? It's always Billy. There's always a Billy. Now, Sam is this week's short-lived sheriff. Though I think Roy Coffey comes in pretty quick, doesn't he? Like, it's either the end of this season or it's very early in season 2. But I remember the sheriffs interchanging a lot in season 1. Like, every week it was a different sheriff because they either died or it was just a different guy for whatever reason. I guess his name is literally Billy the Kid. Billy's not there anymore. The actor who played Billy had a very short-lived part here, didn't he? Oh yeah, I don't know why I keep thinking that he was his father, but he's his brother. No, right? What description did I read? Did I read the right description? Is it his brother or is it his son? Now I'm confused. No, it is his brother. It is his brother. Okay. I don't know why I thought it was his dad. I don't know. Now, this upcoming scene is pretty brutal. This is pretty brutal. Very dark. They made very quick work of them. I guess that's the major difference between the early seasons and the later seasons. It was just tonally, it was just a little bit darker. Good point. I like that line. So much bitterness, it doesn't become you. Oof. I really liked her. I thought she did a great job. Yeah, I think she's a very sympathetic character, but she's so understandable. Like, you can totally understand her anger. Oof, ill timed. Molly coddling. There's some what was the line from the last episode? A hydrophobic skunk? Molly coddling. Here's some good lines. She's totally understandable in this. I think her character was really interesting in this one. See, now I'm annoyed with all these characters, knowing what happens later. Speaking of big game here. Shout out to Haas in this episode for being such a sweet, obedient son. Doesn't question what his pa wants, he just does it. Those peas on his plate, though, yuck. Name a more disgusting food. Oof. Like, that is really dark. Very somber image. I don't mind episodes like this though. I like the darker episodes of Bonanza. I mean, not I don't want every episode of Bonanza to be like this dark story, right? But when you sprinkle them in between here and there, they can be impactful. I like some of the darker stories. Aren't you part of the town? Yeah, this episode is very classic Western shoot 'em up. Like I said, it's basically high noon, but I really like it. I think it's nice to have a generic Western episode once in a while. Just imagine Hoss like telling Adam and Joe what happened and Adam and Joe just being livid and Hoss trying to talk it down. He's like, "Well, this literally happened 12 seconds after you walked out." Noted, Ben had pet sheep. I do really like this narration overlaid with the long camera shot of the street. It is so classic Western. This episode is just very, very classic Western. And it's like Bonanza hadn't quite separated itself from other Westerns yet, but I do really love the vibes in this one. Like just a classic good versus evil story. And the build up to the tension in the last 5 minutes. Oh my gosh. And there are the classic drums. Like all the townspeople closing their blinds, shutting their doors, locking them. The streets are quiet. Just the vibes are immaculate. I love it. If Haas looked at me with that face of disappointment, I would feel so terrible about myself. I'd feel so guilty. Talking a big game. Talk the talk, won't walk the walk. There's a nice aura in this episode. It just feels very big, even in this little limited setting. And just like the feeling of the danger being imminent is really nice. He didn't need to keep that camera shot that long, but I really liked that he did. You have Haas walk into the frame, knock on that barn area, nobody answers, and then he walks out of the frame that very far distance before the camera cuts. Thank you. Thank you very much, Haas. Uh, are you joking? That's right. Adam and Joe would have just been so livid had they been included in this episode. So it's interesting, like their removal from this one. Because I can see the way that they would react to this. Joe would just lose his mind. And Adam would have a very, like, quiet, through gritted teeth reply to all these men. But then again, if Joe and Adam were there, they could easily help Haas execute the plan. So, mm, drag them, Haas. I think this is also a nice story of redemption for Tom Pryor's character. Everyone ostracizes the guy for the hanging of Anne's husband, but then when the time comes to help a friend in a critical situation, they all just shy away. It's just like interesting. Like the town is like responsible for the execution of Ed, and yet like they're hypocrites when it comes to Ben, and they all blame it on Tom Pryor's character, and Tom feels all this regret, and he's trying to redeem himself while the town won't help. It's just a lot of story elements I like. I could not. I could not refuse Haas. Who gets shot the most on Bonanza? I think we've talked about this before, but I think it's probably Michael Landon. Little Joe. I think Little Joe gets shot the most times, but Adam gets shot a bunch of too. Like in at least seasons 1 and 2, I remember Adam getting shot a lot. But I think Little Joe has the record. And I think Haas was probably shot the least. Maybe once or twice. I don't remember Haas getting shot a lot. Anyway, that's a funny record. Who has the record for being shot the most on Bonanza? Wait, she's mad at him now? The ticking clock is a nice touch too. How many shots in this episode have had focused on a character in a scene and then they pan over to the clock ticking? There it is again. I really like that. I think it's super effective as everybody waits for the build up. The last five episodes, I'm sorry. The last 5 minutes of this episode are great, which makes the tension build up throughout so worth it. She could just stand next to his bed with that rifle posed at the door, ready to shoot. Kind of have to agree with Anne on this one. I understand her stance and I totally empathize with her. I get it. I honestly thought that these two were great. Like, Anne is so consumed by her grief and her anger. Totally understandable. And then Tom's character is just guilt shamed himself and turned into a drunk. He's so torn apart by what he did. But yet he's the only guy who comes to help. Therefore, earning his redemption in a way. Oh, the way they walk around this. Wow. I had just Haas and Tom lying so Ben maintains his belief in other people. Ouch. The way she said that. Not with him. Ooh. Dum bum bum. Wow, Captain Obvious to the rescue over here. You're just realizing this now? Man, I love the buildup. The getting ready to execute the plan, cutting to the clock. They don't have enough time. They're showing you how they're putting the plan together. Everybody's watching and waiting in anticipation. It's just good vibes. Good vibes all around. I really like the tension. I don't know. I just like that they're taking their time with this. They're showing you what exactly their plan is. I don't know. Maybe I just appreciate how non rushed this is. It's not all about just the action at the end, even though the action's great. It's about the build up to it. Oh, I just miss TV taking its time a little bit, not feeling like you have to throw the camera around or have all this intense action all the time in order to maintain attention spans. Tom, you had one job. Just out, excuse me, just out of curiosity, I wonder how many shots of the clock are in this episode. Dang, I should have started keeping a tally. Good monologue from him. Yeah. Hmm. Dang, he delivered that really well. Yeah, Simon Scott plays a very compelling character, I think. Because this is a redemption story as much as it is a revenge story or a story about loyalty. Why wouldn't you shut the window instead of just pulling down the drapes? It is so frustrating to see how everyone just ditched Ben. Like, I don't know if I could ever talk to those people again if it was me. Ooh, now we're getting into some of the most classic Western shots in this episode. Guys, I'm such a sucker for a good Western story about good versus evil and the townspeople and the classic shots of the main street. Ooh, these last 5 minutes are so good. Oh God, I just love Westerns so much. Oh gosh. I'm so excited. I've already seen this and I'm excited. I love the direction in this episode so much. And if you notice, there's no music in the background. It's just the raw gunshot sounds and people running and scrambling, which is why I think it's so effective. It's just allowed to be raw. Oh, you get a moss. Oh. Dang. Oh my gosh. It is kind of upsetting watching Tom get shot. Oh, I loved that. I don't know why this makes me so giddy. It's just something about like it's just the good versus evil and the good guys are always going to get the bad guys. It's love the way Ben took that shot at that guy. I kind of want to rewind it and watch it again. Hmm. Hmm. Oh. I like that those were his last words. Darn. Let him do it. He's doing it with one hand in a sling. Like the badass he is. I'm like holding my breath. Now, perhaps the most classic Western shot of all, the standoff between two men. One will live and one will die. Oh, there it is. There's the iconic hand right above the holster shot. Oh, so good. There are some tropey Western things that just work every single time. You just got shot down by an injured man. So apparently you didn't try hard enough, Carl Morgan. Shame, all of you. Don't forget about Anne. I don't know, I'd still be frustrated with the people who I called friends not helping. Aw. Gosh. Wow. See, I wanted that to keep going. I didn't want that to end. I think that they could have kept going on that episode and done a continuation of it. Not that it needed to, but dang, I wanted it to keep going. Wow, where to start talking about this episode? I want to talk a little bit more about Anne, but maybe I should start with Hoss. I loved Hoss's portrayal in this episode. He's a very quiet badass. He's very loyal and obedient to Ben. He follows Ben's orders. I particularly liked all the scenes where he was going around trying to get people to help. And then when people were like, no, we can't, we have families. And quite honestly, this doesn't really concern us. I just loved Hoss's disappointed face. His, oh man, you guys really are cowards. I liked his moments of badassery in the end where he's just shooting people and then moving on to the next person. I just love quiet character moments of just strength and badassery, and I loved what they did with him there. I thought he was great. I thought Lorne Greene was great. You know, he had the bedridden role this time, but I think he was quite good. Although I have to say, I think the character standouts in this episode are definitely Whitney Blake and Simon Scott as Anne and Tom. I think they both played sympathetic characters that were very likable. I thought Simon Scott as Tom Pryor was very believable. You know, when you get to the end and you watch Tom Pryor's death, you actually feel pretty bad. His final lines to Anne being, Anne, forget the hate, before he passes away, I think is very poignant. I like his character a lot because this story is almost a redemption story for him, because he's responsible for the hanging of Anne's innocent husband, and he's so grief-stricken over the fact that he did that this whole episode is almost like redemption and like retribution for the mistake that he made. And I liked that, you know, the town ostracizes Tom's character, and they're like, oh, you're responsible for getting Ed hung, and you convinced everybody that he was bad even though he was innocent, but then when the time comes, the town doesn't show up and it's Tom instead. So I like how they made this into a redemption story for Tom and a redemptive story for Anne. So I think the focus was probably more on them and that dynamic, I would say. And if you think about it, they kind of leave it a little ambiguous by the end of this episode, because Tom dies in Anne's arms, and it just raises a lot of questions, you know, like, will Anne come to believe in the goodness of others through Tom's death? Does it change her mind on the whole situation with her husband? The episode never really gives you like an outright answer on that, but I don't think it necessarily needs to. So I'd have to say like the standout dynamic in this one was probably between both Tom and Anne. Favorite moments in this episode, I thought the tension buildup throughout this episode was great. It really makes the last 5 minutes totally worth it. I have restated this 100 times, but it really does. I think it works fantastically. I loved how there wasn't any music in the fight scene at the end. I don't think they needed it at all. I just think it made the final shootout much rawer, much more believable. I think the direction in this episode was really good. Super classic Western. I think Joseph Kane's direction really stood out. I would say it stood out more because of the context of this story. This story is a little bit more classic Western as opposed to like the saga of Annie O'Toole, which is a pretty comedic episode. And then you have, what was the other one that he did? The Philip Diediesheimer story, which is, it's a dramatic episode, but not in the same fashion that this episode was. So I think he just got to shine a little bit more with the direction because the content of this one was a little bit more action-based. I think this episode had a darker tone to it, too. I love the comedic episodes of the Bonanza, and I love the ones where they're helping somebody out of the goodness of their hearts, but I really do like the darker and the more mature episodes of Bonanza. I think they deviated from that in later seasons. They have quite a few dark episodes coming up, but I think that they did start to make a deviation from that, and I really like the mature stories. I like the dark stories, and obviously I don't want every episode to be this super dark, heavy, mature thing, but I do think that can add a lot of weight to your story. And they had some dark themes in this one. The sheriff and the posse getting killed in like the first 5 minutes and bringing their bodies back into town so everybody can see. It's just some heavy stuff, and I do think that it has its place now and then. And as far as least favorite scene goes, I gotta be honest, there's not much I didn't like in this episode. I just wanted it to keep going. I think they could have added more to make the story more interesting. I don't think it was necessary. I don't think it was needed, but I wouldn't have been opposed if they had decided to go an extra 15 to 20 minutes in this one because I thought it was so engaging. But my final takeaway, I really liked this episode. I thought it was super fun to watch. I like the characters a lot. Whitney Blake, Simon Scott being the highlights. Classic Western vibes. I'm such a sucker for the Western. So this one's pretty highly rated for me. And it's also kind of funny to think about, like, how would Joe and Adam react when they got back into town? Would Hoss be like, well, hey guys, funny story. Couple seconds after you left for your trip to California, Pa got shot in the bank. So I can only imagine like how that conversation went when Joe and Adam got back and how furious they must be. But it's fun to imagine situations like that. What did you guys think of this one? Where does this one rank in the season for you so far? We are 13 episodes into Bonanza. Do you have a ranking list yet? I think this one would be on the higher end for me. What did you think of the themes in this episode? Do you think the character of Tom Pryor earned his redemption by the end of this episode by standing up for Ben? What did you think of Anne's character growth? Do you like that they kind of left it ambiguous, or would you have preferred a more solid answer if her opinion changed towards Tom? Did you guys like how this episode ended, or do you think that it could have gone on for longer? Did you like the place where they chose to stop it, or would you have preferred to see it go on more? Please let me know your thoughts in the comments if you're watching this on YouTube, or you can email me at meltyenjoys@gmail.com, and I would love to read your thoughts on the show. But I thought this one was awesome. I really liked this one. Great episode this week. I believe next week we're watching the episode Sisters? Oh yeah. Okay. This is an Adam love story. Well, kind of. This is kind of an Adam love story. So that one is our episode for next week. Thank you so much for checking out today's episode of Yee-Haw, a Bonanza podcast, and I will see you guys next week when we watch the episode Sisters. So I'll see you then, and I hope you guys have an amazing rest of your day.